Right, we're getting towards the end of it. So we're on our very last macromolecule, and that's our nucleic acids. Now, there's only two kinds, DNA and RNA. DNA stands for deoxyribonucleic acid, and RNA stands for ribonucleic acid. It should tell you right there that deoxy has got one less oxygen than the ribonucleic acid RNA. DNA has got the directions for its own replication. So when your cells divide, one cell is going to divide into two, the DNA has to make a copy of itself, and that's what replication is. So in a certain part of the cell cycle, your chromosome with the which is DNA makes a copy of itself so that when the cell splits and you have two new daughter cells, each new daughter cell has an exact copy of the DNA. DNA also directs the synthesis of messenger RNA, and it controls protein synthesis. Okay, so DNA is trapped in the nucleus and it can't leave. It's not going to leave. It's protected. And there's a nuclear membrane that does not allow any passage except for certain molecules. So what DNA does is it has the code or a nucleotide sequence. I kind of think of it sometimes as a recipe. It's going to have the recipe for all of the proteins that it needs to make. But proteins are assembled on the ribosome, and we'll get to that when we get to cell parts. But the ribosome is outside the nucleus. So in order to get the recipe from DNA out of the nucleus to the ribosome for it to be assembled, that primary structure of the protein to be assembled, it has got to make a piece of RNA. Now there's three kinds of RNA. So right here they're just talking about messenger. Messenger is little m RNA. That's what it stands for. And little messenger, or little m RNA, has got the code. And so DNA makes a piece of messenger RNA, and then that messenger RNA is going to leave the nucleus and head out to the ribosome. When it gets to the ribosome and those amino acids are assembled, this is what's called gene expression. So maybe that protein recipe or code is for adrenaline if it's in your adrenal gland. Maybe it's for insulin. Any other hormone, it's going to have its own sequence of amino acids. And those amino acids have to be translated in order for that hormone to be made. So that's what we call gene expression. And that is going to happen on the ribosome. Now, each gene on a DNA molecule directs the synthesis of messenger RNA. So I just said this a minute ago, it's going to have to make this piece of messenger RNA. And it's what interacts with the protein synthesizing machinery. That's a real fancy name for saying the ribosome. And the ribosome is going to pull together the amino acid sequence, and it is going to connect it with the peptide bonds. So the flow of genetic information goes from DNA to RNA to a protein.